The dawn over southern Italy rose like a wounded ember, dull red at the edges and bruised purple at its heart, as if the sky itself had taken a hit during the night and hadn't yet recovered. Captain Jonathan Jack Rourke of the 486th Bombardment Group stood on the uneven stone steps outside their temporary briefing hut, rubbing a thumb along the frayed edge of his leather jacket while watching the horizon brighten. He could already hear the distant cough and whine of ground crews waking the airfield, metal clanging, engines sputtering, shouts carried by the wind. His B-17, Liberty Bell, waited somewhere in the pale morning haze, her four Wright Cyclones silent for now, but eager, in a way only a bomber could be eager, to thunder back into the war-torn sky. Jack took a slow breath, filling his lungs with cold air that smelled faintly of fuel, dust, and the lingering ashes of last night's cooking fires. He had slept poorly again, though none of his crew would have been surprised. Sleep came reluctantly to bomber captains in Italy. Flak bursts had a habit of echoing in their skulls long after the mission ended, and the memories of lost crews seemed to drift through the canvas tents at night like restless ghosts. But today was different. Today, Command had tapped Liberty Bell for a high-priority strike, cutting the German supply artery running through the Brenner Pass. It was the kind of mission that could shift momentum in the entire Northern Front, if done right. It was also the kind of mission that could swallow a squadron whole. Inside the briefing hut, the air buzzed with tension as tired men crowded together, jackets half-zipped, boots muddy, eyes red but alert. The map on the wall had a thick red line slashing from their field near Foggia up through the jagged spine of the Apennines and toward German-held territory. "You'll be flying at 22,000 feet, Major Kendall announced, voice gravelly from too many cigarettes and too little sleep. A low murmur rippled through the crews. Someone coughed. Someone else muttered a prayer. Jack said nothing, just watched the line on the map and felt the familiar knot tighten under his sternum. The crew of Liberty Bell gathered around him afterward with forced smiles and strained bravado. Lieutenant Eddie Graves, the baby-faced co-pilot who never seemed to stop grinning no matter how dire things got, slapped Jack's shoulder. "Piece of cake, Skipper. Clear skies, calm day. Maybe the crowd slept in." Jack raised an eyebrow. "And maybe you'll stop talking long enough for us to get the engine started." Eddie just laughed, a warm, youthful sound Jack cherished more than he ever admitted. Sergeant Tom Hollister, the radio operator, carried a small notebook filled with letters he'd never mailed and poems he'd never shown anyone. He looked at Jack with quiet steadiness. "We bring everyone home, Captain, same as always." Jack nodded, though the weight of that promise settled like a stone between his ribs. And then there were the gunners. Fiery Staff Sergeant Maria "Red" Delaney in the top turret, her red hair tucked under a cap but still rebellious where curls escaped. Steady Joe McGinnis and Leo Farber at the waist guns. Old-timer Buck Travers in the ball turret, a man so small and calm that Jack sometimes forgot he was crammed inside the most claustrophobic spot on the plane. And finally, Frank Delgado at the tail, sharp-eyed, quick-witted, and loyal to a fault. They were an odd patchwork of personalities, but together, they made Liberty Bell more than a bomber. They made her a home. They took off just after sunrise, the B-17 roaring down the makeshift runway, rattling like a crate full of loose screws until her wheels lifted free of the earth and the thunder of her engines became a steady, defiant heartbeat. As they climbed, the sun broke through the cloud layer in shimmering gold bands that struck the wings, making the bomber glow like something out of legend. Jack leveled off, checked his gauges, and felt the tension in his shoulders ease slightly. Up here, even with the dangers ahead, the sky felt clean, honest. Formation tightened as dozens of B-17s joined them, their silver bodies glinting. Below stretched the rugged terrain of Italy, snow-capped mountains, winding rivers, ruined towns still bearing scars from years of conflict. Jack watched it all pass beneath them, a patchwork of beauty and devastation. "Approaching Verona airspace," Tom announced over the intercom, voice steady but taut. The first flak burst bloomed to their right, an ugly black flower opening in the serene blue sky. The crew tensed, and Jack felt the knot in his chest twist hard. Another burst, closer, and then another. "Hold steady," he murmured, gripping the yoke. Keep formation. They'll try to scatter us." The heavens erupted. Flak shells tore open around them in violent blossoms, each one shaking the bomber as if some giant hand was trying to swat them from the sky. Shrapnel pinged against the fuselage. Eddie's knuckles turned white on the controls. "They are awake today," he shouted. "Top turret engaging," Red called out. From her elevated perch, she scanned the sky. Though no fighters had appeared yet, more bursts hammered them, rocking Liberty Bell so hard Jack felt his teeth clack together. A piece of shrapnel punched through the radio room wall. "I'm fine," Tom quickly shouted. "Just scared enough to pray harder." They pushed through the barrage with the stubborn resolve of a bomber crew that had faced death too many times to break now. When they finally emerged from the thickest flak, the entire formation bore scars, holes punched through wings, chipped propellers, smoke trailing from a few wounded ships. One B-17 lagged behind, engine coughing dark plumes. Jack's stomach tightened. They all knew a straggler was a wolf's invitation. "Fighters! 6 o'clock high!" Frank screamed. Jack craned his neck as streaks of silver and gray cut down from the sun. Messerschmitts, dozens. The tail gun erupted with a vicious chatter, joined by the top and waist guns in a symphony of defiance. The fighters sliced towards them like blades, cannons flashing. Jack banked Liberty Bell as much as formation allowed, engines roaring. The Luftwaffe swept into the formation, carving chaos. One of the B-17s exploded in a burst of fire and smoke, pieces tumbling downward like dying stars. Jack swallowed the grief and kept flying. There was no room for mourning here, only survival. Frank downed a fighter with a steady burst, and Red tore through another, shouting triumphantly over the intercom. But the fighters kept coming. A Messerschmitt latched onto our tail, peppering them with bullets that shattered control cables and tore through the tail section. "I've got him!" Frank yelled, unleashing a desperate burst. The fighters spun away, trailing smoke, but Frank's triumph was cut short by a harsh cry. "I'm hit!" Jack felt a cold jolt. Frank, talk to me!" "I'm bleeding, but I'm still here. Keep flying, Captain." The pass was over. The fighters regrouped, preparing for another attack. But the bombers were nearing the target. Jack steadied Liberty Bell. Bomb bay doors open. The long whisper of hydraulics answered. The belly of the bomber yawned open, revealing the railway yards below, lines of fuel cars and supply crates that fed the German war machine. "Bombs away," Joe announced, voice cracking with adrenaline. The payload tumbled earthward, and moments later, the world below erupted in towering flames and mushrooming black clouds. The shockwave hit them even at altitude. Cheers broke across the intercom, exhausted, desperate cheers. But they weren't safe. Not yet. The fighters pounced again. One Messerschmitt dove straight at Liberty Bell, guns blazing, bullets stitched across the fuselage. Eddie cried out as sparks erupted from the panel. The hydraulic system screeched. Smoke poured from engine 3. "Feather 3!" Jack shouted, fighting the yoke as the bomber lurched. Eddie reached for the control, teeth gritted. The prop slowed, stopped, then locked. Engine 3 feathered. They dropped from formation, wounded, vulnerable, a single limping bomber over enemy territory. Jack's heart pounded. They were alone now. The fighters turned towards them like wolves scenting blood. Red screamed curses as she fired upward. Joe and Leo spat bullets from the waist guns. Buck's calm voice drifted from the ball turret. "Almost got him. Almost. Now!" A Messerschmitt burst into flames beneath them, but another fighter streaked in, blind with fury. It struck them with a blistering pass, punching rounds through the left wing. Engine 2 sputtered, coughed, caught again. Frank fired wildly, his voice strained with pain. One last burst struck the Messerschmitt, sending it spiraling away. They kept flying, riding on stubbornness and adrenaline. The fighters finally broke off, low on fuel. Silence flooded the intercom, broken only by ragged breathing. Jack looked over the ruined gauges, the trembling wings, the smoke trailing behind them. "We're going to make it," he said quietly, not sure if it was truth or hope. But the crew believed him. That was enough. Crossing back into friendly airspace felt like stepping from shadow into sunlight. By the time the field came into view, Liberty Bell was barely holding together. Jack coaxed her downward, guiding her, gently, tenderly. The wheels touched the earth with a rough, jarring skid. Metal screeched. Sparks flew. The bomber shuddered to a halt. Silence. A breathless, sacred silence. Jack released the yoke, chest heaving. Eddie leaned back, tears unashamed on his cheeks. Hell of a ride, Skipper. Jack nodded, eyes wet. Hell of a crew. They helped Frank from the tail, bandaged and pale, but smiling. The ground crew stared at the battered bomber, holes everywhere, metal sheared, engines coughing their final breaths. One mechanic whispered, "How in the God's name did she stay in the air?" Jack looked at his crew, every one of them alive, battered, but breathing. "She didn't," he said softly. "We did." That evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains and turned the sky a deep, burning gold, word came from command. The Brenner Pass strike had crippled the German supply line. The tide in northern Italy had shifted.